Before we get started, kindly take a second to ensure you're subscribed. YouTube recently scrubbed 20 subscriptions from our small channel. Ensuring you are subscribed and liking the video will help us grow. Thank you.
Development on the struggling Sega Saturn. And while not much is known about this point of development, there is a few nuggets of information. Firstly, Sonic Adventure Saturn, which will be referred to as SA Saturn from this point on, had a very short development lifespan. Sega enthusiasts are well aware at this point that the Sega Saturn bombed in the market and wasn't gonna last much longer. Not wanting their next flagship title to make its debut on a sinking ship, SA Saturn's development team made the jump to the Sega Dreamcast. The work done on SA Saturn would be repurposed into Sonic World, a counterpart segment to the compilation of Sonic 1 through 3 and Knuckles found on Sonic Jam. While Sonic World served as a Sonic museum of sorts, its actual purpose was to serve as a tech demo for platforming in a 3D space. Getting back to Sonic Adventure, the most that is known of SA Saturn are these screenshots shown at the Sonic Adventure musical experience, and concept art shared by designer Satoshi Okano, notably the one depicting a spider character, which can be seen on posters in Speed Highway. During development of Sonic Adventure, several characters underwent design tweaks. Most notable among these were newcomers E102 Gamma and Big the Cat. In Big the Cat's case, his earlier designs follow a silhouette similar to his final appearance, though there seems to have been a notable focus on exaggeration. Some are relatively minimalist, like Big having no articles of clothing save for sandals, while others show him bearing fangs or towering over Sonic even more than he already does in the final game. In the case of the unusually large Big, strange sentence we know, it appears that his design leaned more on Totoro from Hayao Miyazaki's My Neighbor Totoro. For E102 Gamma, his design tweaks were more drastic. While his theme as a gun-wielding robot remained intact, Gamma would otherwise undergo complete changes to his entire body shape. One depicts him with a triangular body and a top hat-like head, with the overall aesthetic of the body closely resembling Dr. Eggman's original outfit. Another shows him having a circular body, a hood-like cover, topping a belt-like structure, topped off with him dual-wielding machine guns. From this point on, the structures resembling a belt would stay, while the hood seems to have been redesigned as a visor. The next design boasts a body shape resembling a tombstone, while returning to the single machine gun, while the next design boasts a rounder shape. The final design has clearly taken after the first three, and gave Gamma a more threatening stature.
Sonic Triple Trouble was developed by Aspect as a sequel to the earlier Game Gear and Master System game, Sonic Chaos. We'll be talking about two versions of Sonic Triple Trouble in this video, the first being the well-known and official Sega Game Gear release, and the second being a fan-created reimagining for Windows PC and Android. The game's Japanese name reflects this lineage better, bearing the title Sonic and Tails 2. Aspect Co. is a company Sonic fans should be familiar with. In addition to developing Sonic Triple Trouble and its predecessor Sonic Chaos, they also developed Sonic 2's 8-bit version and Tails Adventure for the Game Gear, but more on that another time. In addition to the name change, the title screen between Sonic and Tails 2 and Sonic Triple Trouble has been completely redone, sporting a different Sonic pose, removing Tails, and adding Knuckles. Triple Trouble introduces a new antagonist to the Sonic the Hedgehog series, Knack the Weasel, aka Fang the Sniper in Japan. Knack was designed by Shinji Higashi, otherwise known as Toma, a well-regarded character artist in Japan who at the time worked for Sega. Interesting to note that Higashi designed a popular line of figures, several of which have an appearance similar to Knack. Knack would go on to make appearances in Sonic the Fighters and Sonic Drift 2. His likeness would appear in Sonic Mania, but not the true character. Since the Master System and Game Gear share much of the same hardware, it's relatively easy to port games between the two systems. As a consequence, every 8-bit Sonic platformer was released on both systems in some form or another. From Sonic 1 to Sonic Blast, every 8-bit game was released on both systems in one region or another. This is with the exception of Sonic Triple Trouble. Prototype materials and magazines suggest it was once to be ported to the Master System, but for whatever reason this didn't happen. In spite of no official Master System port, in 2009 a port of Triple Trouble was made to the Master System. This port was made by hacking scene member Glitch. While the conversion to the Master System does mean the game can make use of fewer colors, the larger resolution and ability to play on a TV make this a fair trade-off. Many other Master System conversions have been made for Game Gear games. Perhaps we'll take a look at them in a future video. There is unused cover art for Triple Trouble by the legendary Greg Martin, known for drawing cover art for many video game franchises in the 1990s, including drawing the cover art for Sonic 2, the 16-bit version, Sonic Chaos, Sonic Spinball, Pac-Man and Mrs. Pac-Man on the Sega Genesis and Game Boy, and many others. Archie Comics had a long-standing monthly Sonic the Hedgehog series between the years of 1993 and 2017. As part of that series, Sonic Triple Trouble was adapted into a 48-page Super Sonic special. The story of the comic only loosely follows the game, involving Dr. Robotnik accidentally splitting a Chaos Emerald in half and hiring Knack the Weasel to retrieve them. After splitting, one of the halves of the emerald causes new zones to appear. These new zones are the levels from the game, and the comic features a brief montage of Sonic traversing through all the zones of the game. Meanwhile, the other half of the emerald falls on the floating island, and Knuckles is warned to retrieve it by ancient beings, because should the emerald half meet the Master Emerald, it could destroy the floating island. Eventually, Knack captures Sonic and heads to the floating island to nab the second half of the emerald. There he runs into Knuckles, who punches him in the face and frees Sonic. But Sonic, unaware of his captor, assumes it to be Knuckles, and the pair get into a fight. The two soon realize that Knack is working for Robotnik and work together to subdue their new enemy.
ソニックとテイルズがまだまだゲームギアで大暴れドクターエッグマンダックスルズそして新キャラファング盛りだくさんで最新作ソニック&テイルズ2
Fair warning at this part of the video, since Sonic Triple Trouble 16-bit is a new release, there will be spoilers and secrets from the game ahead. You have been warned. While there is limited information on the development of the original Triple Trouble for Game Gear, that is not such with the unofficial remake. This is particularly due to the fact the game was created by friend and voice of the channel Noah Copeland. While the following information about the Triple Trouble remake is accurate, not all of it is sourced outside of this video. During an interview with the podcast Procedurally Generated, Noah was asked why he chose to remake Sonic Triple Trouble. Noah stated that his reasons were that it would translate best to Genesis-style gameplay. Because of all the 8-bit Sonic titles, it was closest to capturing the 16-bit gameplay. Originally, Noah intended to make the levels of the game very faithful to the original, reasoning that the level maps were roughly half the size of the Genesis level maps, and scaling the 8-bit maps by 2 and redrawing them with Genesis-style graphics would do the job. The translation did not go as expected. The physics of the Sonic Genesis games were different enough that doing a one-to-one translation of the stages resulted in stages that weren't fit for the physics and were not enjoyable to play. Thus Noah forged ahead with a new direction, reimagining each stage for the 16-bit version, leading to levels that match the flow of the original game, but include a lot of detail and gimmicks not found in the original. There is a second origin to the Triple Trouble remake. Another friend of the channel, D Lightyears, has been making pixel art for 16-bit versions of Triple Trouble since 2010, with the intent of someday finding an engine and making a game out of these concepts and tiles. The team-up of Noah Copeland and D Lightyears gave Noah the art he needed to make his Triple Trouble remake a reality, and over the next 5 years, he did just that. Lightyears is responsible for much of the art in Triple Trouble, and she previously contributed to another unofficial Sonic game, Sonic Time Twisted. She mentioned that Sunset Park and Meta Jungle Zone were the first two tile sets conceptualized. Robotnik Winter and Tidal Plant were the most difficult levels to reimagine, requiring the assistance of additional artists. While the game was largely programmed, designed, and scored by Noah Copeland, with art help from D Lightyears, they had support from some long-standing members of the Sonic fan game community. Sprite artist Dolphman, a longtime member of Sonic Retro and the Spriters resource communities, provided many of the 16-bit versions of Triple Trouble's badniks, item sprites, and other various level graphics and touch-ups. Vector Satire, creator of the movement engine that powered Sonic Time Twisted and a longtime Sonic scener, consulted on the technical aspects of this project. Popular hacking scene chiptune artist Johnny Tay and DV2 also participated by providing additional tracks for the game. In the 8-bit game, Knack was originally intended to be featured in levels outside of the special stages. While this did not happen, the remake implements this idea by reimagining each of Knack's fights as a mini-boss in the game's proper levels. There is one zone in Triple Trouble 16 that isn't found in the original Game Gear title. That is the single act of Egg Zeppelin, in which Sonic boards a giant Zeppelin of Robotnik's making and destroys it before landing in Robotnik Winter. There's also a hidden zone in Triple Trouble 16. In the original Triple Trouble, the special stages are a mix of these purple rune-style stages and pseudo 3D flight stages using sprite scaling. These purple rune stages are replaced in the remake with a foot race in 3D against Knack that wouldn't look too out of place on a real Genesis. Aside from these special stages looking really cool, this left no use for the purple rune-style special stages. That's why here, in the Triple Trouble remake, it's a hidden zone. The zone is accessed much in the same way that the Hidden Palace zone is accessed in the Sonic 2 remake for Android and iOS, and now in Sonic Origins. To access this zone, just go to the save point before the boss in Robotnik Winter. Run to the left and jump off the cliff. You'll now land in a new zone, Purple Palace Zone. Very cool. Speaking of special stages, one interesting fact is that the idea to retry special stages by spending a life had previously been adapted into fellow fan game Sonic Time Twisted. It's possible that the concept of spending lives to retry special stages also inspired the ability to spend coins to retry special stages in the anniversary mode of Sonic Origins. This idea of spending lives in special stages to retry them originated with One Mercury Silver, one of the developers behind Sonic Time Twisted and Sonic Fan Remix. During development, Noah took great care to limit the color palettes and effects to only what could be reasonably recreated on a real Sega Genesis. Noah wanted the game to feel like a continuation of Sonic 3 and Knuckles down to using enhanced versions of the Sonic 3 sprites and preserving the 4:3 aspect ratio for those who prefer it. The soundtrack for the original Triple Trouble was composed by Yayoi Fujimori. For the reimagining, Noah remixed all the game's original soundtrack using VSTs for emulating the Sega Genesis sound chip, making the game's soundtrack authentic to the capabilities of the Sega Genesis sound hardware. Some of the additional composers on the reimagining soundtrack made use of Deflict Mask, which can output sound data to real Sega Genesis hardware. Like many fan games, Triple Trouble 16-bit reuses graphics from some of the official series. It also borrows graphics from 2 cancelled Sega Technical Institute games. The background tiles from Meta Jungle come from a cancelled Tales spin-off game called Treasure Tales. The rocket ship that takes the player to Atomic Destroyer is a reused asset from a cancelled video game called Spinny and Spike. There's a badnik from Atomic Destroyer Zone that was intended for the original game, but was cut for unknown reasons. A 16-bit version of this enemy was created for the 16-bit remake and was given an attack in which the badnik shoots small missiles at the player. To promote the launch of the remake, a comic was created to provide backstory for the 3 villains of the game. Noah also created some 1990s-style advertisements for the game, which you can see now.
I'm a cow, and I know trouble when I see it. Yikes! This is Triple Trouble, the new Sonic game for Game Gear. Trouble is doing stupid cheese ads.
It's the cheesiest.
Triple Trouble is Sonic battling the evil Dr. Robotnik, Knuckles, and Knack. But that trouble ain't nothing compared to this. Oh, ow, ow, hey, ow, 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 Sega!
Sonic Triple Trouble and Sega Game Gear, each sold separately, batteries not included.
Thanks to Noah Copeland and D. Lightyears for providing insights into the game's development. Which version of Triple Trouble do you like better? Leave a comment below and let us know.
Ever wanted to learn about the best new Super Mario Bros Wii hacks? Well, find out in new Super Mario Bros Wii Hacks Game Facts Special. First up, newer Super Mario Bros Wii by the newer team is the most impactful hack on this list. That's because many of the other hacks on this list are based on the newer hack rather than the base game. By itself, the newer hack has over 130 well-polished levels. You can even now play with the Hammer Bros power-up, like in Mario Bros 3. The first several levels are easy enough to tackle, but the game will become more challenging as you progress. The hack was originally released in June of 2013, but about 4 years ago, the newer team announced they were making a deluxe version. The last update was just 8 months ago, and the game still appears to be in progress. New Retro Mario Bros. Recreates the first levels from the original Super Mario Bros. To Super Mario World. The hack uses new versions of classic tunes and has some graphic modifications to make the game feel more retro. As far as NSMB hacks go, it's on the shorter side, but it's fun to see all these classic stages redone in the new Super Mario Bros. Style. Deluxe Super Mario Bros. Wii may not be as original as newer Super Mario Bros., containing mostly remixed levels as opposed to more custom levels, but it still serves as a great way to replay new Super Mario Bros., containing 77 courses, new colors for Yoshi, and some custom graphics. The game was made by MNSG and was released as a full hack on October 25th, 2019. Another hack made by the newer team, Newer Summer Sun, has 23 custom levels, a custom level map, new lighting, and custom music just to start. It's a short game, but it's rather unique, being completely based on sunny locations. A little Super Mario Sunshine, anyone? Thanks for watching. Please remember to subscribe and like the video. We're a teeny tiny channel trying to grow, so every subscription helps immensely. Okay, let's look at a couple more level hacks and then showcase Sonic and the rest of these crazy character hacks. Super Mario and the Cliff Springs is super difficult, but that doesn't mean I wouldn't recommend it. This game is made for Mario experts looking for a challenge, for super players, if you will. The hack promises to use new Super Mario Bros. Mechanics in unique ways unseen in the base game and other hacks. It almost feels reminiscent of Celeste. Super Luigi Land Wii by the new Luigi team is a 22-level hack. It features custom bosses, new physics, Luigi, Wario, and a new world map. It's one of the newer ROM hacks on this list. Well worth a play to see how far the scene has come. There's also a ton of character skins for new Super Mario Bros. Wii. Here's a Sonic the Hedgehog skin by Memehog. Something about swimming and jumping in a Mario game with Sonic seems not quite right, but I'll allow it. Here's a version of Tails' doll from Sonic R created by Solf. Here's a Rayman skin by Croissant. It might be the most polished character hack in this episode. And of course, there's a Shrek skin. Look at this unholy abomination. Super Mario Starlight Adventure is one of the newer hacks on this list, released in 2022 and created by Supa. Starlight Adventure is a full game hack with 8 new worlds to explore in, all set at night with some Halloween themes. Mario's Final Adventure Wii is another full-length hack made in recent years and directed by Bomb King. It might be the most polished hack with the most original levels in this hack showcase. If you can only get one hack from this video, make it this one. Super Mario Vacation was created by Wadland in just 3 weeks. It's a mini hack consisting of 7 custom levels, new music, and new art. The new level layouts are quite nice and themed to mountain and desert areas. Super Mario Superstar is another hack released in 2022 that features a full 8 new worlds. This one was built on top of the newer Super Mario Bros. Hack. Superstar contains some level themes not seen in the new Super Mario Bros. Series, including factory and food-themed levels. Peach and Daisy join Mario and Luigi as playable characters as well. Curse of the Black Toad is a rather fun hack. The hack contains some unorthodox and gimmicky level design, with inspiration taken from everything from Donkey Kong to the Hunger Games. DU Super Wario Bros is a very difficult hack, so what you'll see here is a lot of demo playback as it would have played for the original game. You better be good if you plan on picking this hack up, but at least you can play as Wario or a purple Luigi, who I assume is intended to represent Waluigi. If you would like to run any of these hacks yourself, the easiest way to do it is using the Dolphin emulator. This won't be a full tutorial, but we'll cover the basics. Of course, you must own a copy of New Super Mario Bros Wii and obtain an ISO image for the game. Put the game's ISO in a folder that Dolphin can see games from. Most hacks come in a zip file containing a Revolution folder and a folder named after the hack. Drop both of these into the load directory within the Dolphin emulator's folder. From there, right-click on your game and select Start with Revolution Patches. Then click Open Revolution XML and select the XML file that matches the hack you want to play. I will note that some of these hacks don't come in this format, and you may need to manually move files around to get them to work correctly. If done correctly, you should be up and running playing New Super Mario Bros Wii with hacks.
Sonic X-treme went through many developers and designers as it toiled in development hell. Because of this, there are several different versions of the story. These stories were first documented on Chris Sen's Sonic X-treme Compendium, and later added to Sonic Retro's wiki. Most of them involve the new characters, Tiara the Manx Kitten and her father, Professor Boobowski. Let's go through all 6 of them. Sonic Mars by Michael Kosaka. While Sonic is absent, a cryptic message from a computer alerts Sally, Bunny, Tails, and Knuckles about trouble in Micro Mobius, a virtual reality world that would have been new to the series. The inhabitants plead for help against Robotnik. Upon returning to Knothole, Sonic discovers Robotnik has captured Sonic's friends and taken them to Micro Mobius. His plan is to reformat this virtual world, presumably for his own nefarious purposes. With his friends in danger, Sonic must enter Micro Mobius and confront Robotnik. Sonic Saturn by Christian Sen, April 28, 1995. This story takes into account the events of Sonic 3 and Knuckles and Robotnik's defeat on the floating island, though it, like the Sonic Mars plot, takes some elements from Sat AM, such as Knothole Village. Following Robotnik's defeat, peace reigns in Mobius. But Sonic remains suspicious as Robotnik has disappeared. Fearing that he's once again after the Chaos Emeralds, Sonic sends Tails and Knuckles to search the skies for Robotnik while he covers land. While split up, Robotnik captures Knuckles and Tails while attempting to harness the power of the Master Chaos Emerald. The Doctor's attempt is unsuccessful though, as the Emerald explodes, engulfing the room in a dark light. From the smoke emerges 6 shadowy figures, the Chaos Elementals, who overpower Robotnik. Meanwhile, Sonic witnesses a strange storm brewing in the distance. Determined to investigate, he races towards it, marking the beginning of his journey. In this version of the story, Sonic must traverse 6 zones to rescue his friends and Robotnik from the grasp of the Chaos Elementals. By Zone 5, the Chaos Elementals anticipate Sonic's arrival in Gordos, a massive robot city where they hold their captives. They lack the speed to directly capture Sonic, so they rely on a giant robot powered by their combined elemental abilities, the Chaos Megabot. Sonic Twist by Christian Sen, August 21st, 1995. Sonic has a date with Tiara, a princess who lives far away. He needs to reach her before nightfall to avoid her getting upset. To impress her, he plans on gifting her a necklace with Chaos Emeralds. Dr. Robotnik learns about Sonic's date and decides to ruin it. He uses his new weapon, the Super Duper Mega Ray Cannon, on Mobius. The cannon blasts a forest, causing trees and other objects to float in the sky, creating a twisted and hazardous landscape that Sonic must traverse on his way to Tiara and putting the planet back together. Zones would have included Circus Theater, a floating amusement park with robots trapped in cages. Gadget Mall, a massive airborne sale of appliances and electronics. Mayan Tombs, maze-like ruins filled with traps. Blackjacks, a Las Vegas-inspired zone with gambling games. Deep Seas, underwater world with robotic sharks and fish. Mad Traffic, a chaotic mess of highways and buildings. and Inferno, a hellish zone with lava and spike traps. Sonic Boom by Christian Sen. The story opens with Sonic rescuing Tiara from a trap set by Robotnik. Unfortunately, the chains binding her were laced with the Doom virus, infecting Sonic in the process. Tiara directs him to Professor Boobowski, the only one who can create a cure. Sonic seeks out Professor Boobowski at his castle. The professor explains he needs ingredients from different worlds to create the cure. Using the Twist Chamber, a device that transports individuals to these worlds, Sonic embarks on a multi-world journey to gather the ingredients. However, just before acquiring the final ingredient, Robotnik kidnaps the professor. Disguised as Professor Boobowski, Robotnik attempts to trick Sonic into handing over the final ingredient. Sonic, recognizing the deception, confronts the villain in a climactic showdown. Sonic Doom by Christian Sen and Richard Wheeler, January 17, 1996. Expanding on and combining some of the previous stories, Dr. Robotnik tampers with the Master Chaos Emerald, accidentally releasing the Chaos Doom, a malevolent entity imprisoned within. The Chaos Doom spreads the Doom virus, infecting anyone who comes in contact with it. Sonic encounters Tiara, infected by the virus. She directs him to her father, Professor Boobowski, the only one who can create a cure. The professor explains that Sonic needs ingredients scattered across various dimensions to create the cure. In this version of the game, Professor Boobowski's map room allows Sonic to warp between these dimensions to collect the ingredients. He faces enemies made of different elements and mutated bosses guarding each ingredient. After collecting most of the ingredients, Professor Boobowski is kidnapped. Disguised as Boobowski, Robotnik tries to trick Sonic into handing over the last ingredient, but Sonic isn't easily fooled, leading to a final showdown. The story ends on a cliffhanger for a potential Sonic X-treme 2, where Sonic will face the 6 powerful monks of the Chaos Doom. Sonic PC by Christian Sen. Years after being defeated by Sonic, Dr. Robotnik seeks revenge. He builds an army of robots and dark figures who kidnap innocent creatures. Sonic, blissfully unaware on a snowy vacation, falls victim to one of Robotnik's traps, a space balloon. The balloon transports Sonic millions of light years towards Robotnik's monstrous space station, the Death Egg. Sonic, however, manages to escape by using his signature spin dash to damage the pod's computer. The damaged pod plummets towards a new world, the Jade Gully Jungle Planet. This sets the stage for Sonic's escape from Robotnik and his new journey, presumably back home. Sonic X-treme by Yasuhara Hirokazu and Richard Wheeler. After a previous defeat, Robotnik returns with a vengeance. He constructs a new Death Egg, a space station so massive it can pull planets out of their orbits. Several planets already orbit this menacing station, and Sonic's world is next on Robotnik's conquest list. With the world being drawn towards the Death Egg's gravity, time is running out. Tails builds a teleporter to send Sonic directly to the Death Egg's core to destroy it. However, during the teleportation process, something goes wrong. A small planet orbiting the Death Egg disrupts the teleportation, sending Sonic to a strange world occupied by Robotnik's Badnik robots. With the planet's inhabitants, the MIPS, having been captured and roboticized, Sonic must free the MIPS, reach the Death Egg, and destroy it before Robotnik conquers his world and potentially others. For quite some time before Chris Sen created the Sonic X-treme Compendium. The only Sonic X-treme storyline known was one written for the Red Shoe Diaries. In this version of the story, Tiara and Professor Boobowski are guardians of the 6 Rings of Order. Fearing that Robotnik is after the rings for their power, Tiara and the Professor call upon Sonic to stop this from happening. According to Chris Sen, unlike the other stories mentioned, this one was never seriously considered and was made up for the magazine article specifically.
The Super Mario hacking scene is one of the largest hacking scenes on the internet. Most of Mario's legacy outings have at least several high-quality hacks. Many hacks reinvent the games with new levels, moves, and power-ups. Here, we'll examine several completed ROM hacks for Super Mario World and Super Mario 64. We'll see what we can learn about them and the tools used to create them. New Super Mario World 2 Around the World was originally released in July 2019. The hack was created by Pink Gold Peach, who was 16 at the time of its release. Development of the hack lasted for 3 years and consisted of a fairly ambitious 16 worlds. It was a sequel to the original New Super Mario World, the 12 Magic Orbs, which was created in 9 months and is substantially less polished. The hack includes features not present in the original Super Mario World base game, including the ability to transform into enemies, wall jump, and additional power-ups. The game's story begins with Bowser scheming to destroy the world from a space station, where the King Koopa is holding the Princess Peach hostage. This hack in particular is one of the most celebrated Mario World hacks in recent years. It's popular enough to have several copies of the hack for sale as bootleg cartridges for Super Nintendo. Super Mario World Secret of the 7 Golden Statues is a ROM hack released by Mario 90 in August 2012. The story, as quoted from romhacking.net, is Mario and Luigi were heading back to Peach's castle after another one of their amazing adventures. However, as soon as they walked in, Peach sends them on another mission to collect the 7 golden statues which Bowser had stolen from her not long ago. Where did they come from? Where did they go? I added that part myself. And what's so bad about Bowser stealing some statues? Play and find out. This hack features new moves for Mario, such as a ground pound and wall jump, a common theme among Super Mario World hacks, custom enemies, and new bosses in addition to the many new levels to play through. Mega Mario World Another Universe was released in 2018 by Yoshi3706. The hack consists of 8 new worlds to explore. One unique aspect of this hack is that some of the levels are designed as 2D obstacle playgrounds inspired by Mario 64 level design. The hack also features levels inspired by both Yoshi's Island and Sonic's original Genesis and Mega Drive adventures. There's even a level where you control the flood from Super Mario Sunshine and the submarine and airplane from the original Super Mario Land. Most of these Super Mario World hacks would have been developed using the level editor Lunar Magic, which is a long-standing level editor for Super Mario World, first released in the year 2000 and last updated in September of 2021 to version 3.3.1.
And this is the fun section.
That's a matter of opinion. It's so awesome just to watch somebody else play through this and know that
Oh, you can save it.
I'm not the only one, and neither is anybody else who's played this that's struggled with this. This is the hardest part of the entire game.
Yeah.
This is probably the second hardest level in the game to one-shot for sure. And go just did
no problems.
Yeah. I've seen people.
There are 2 versions of the Super Mario Odyssey 64 hack, both created by probably the most prolific Mario 64 modder, Kei's Amanuar. The hacks include many features previously found exclusive to Mario Odyssey, including throwing Cappy and possessing enemies. The first hack is a rather straightforward mod that incorporates Cappy into the existing Mario 64 base game. It's rather buggy all in all, but players will have a great time romping through the familiar Super Mario 64 levels, using Cappy to capture everything from a butterfly to Bowser. The second Super Mario Odyssey 64 hack includes a completely original overworld and levels based on Mario Odyssey. The hack includes a total of 80 moons to collect. There are levels based on the Cap Kingdom, Cascade Kingdom, Sand Kingdom, Woodland Kingdom, and Bowser's Kingdom. Another one of Kei's ROM hacks is the well-regarded Super Mario 64 Ocarina of Time, which ports the world of Ocarina of Time into Super Mario 64, adding 171 stars, coins, and enemies to the familiar landscapes of Hyrule. The hack allows players to travel between the Young Link and the Adult Link versions of Ocarina of Time's levels at will. Kei's himself has been issued DMC takedown notices from Nintendo on 2 occasions. First, with his hack, Super Mario 64 Online, which is an online multiplayer version of Mario 64, and Last Impact, another one of his Super Mario 64 hacks. On both accounts, Case took down the ROM hacks, but the download files were quickly replaced by third-party links and no further action was taken. When reflecting on the events in an interview, Case noted that the takedowns were rather inconsequential, both to him and the popularity of his ROM hacks. Super Mario and the Planet Stardust Rampage was created by Faraz242 and released in September of 2013. This ROM hack features 116 stars to collect over 15 courses. In this adventure, after defeating Bowser, Mario has chased his enemy into the Star Valley, where he blasts off into space through a space cannon to the planet Stardust, which is where this adventure begins. At the time of release, Faraz considered it his best contribution to the Mario 64 hacking scene. But Faraz had two later Mario 64 ROM hacks that are likely improvements over Planet Stardust Rampage. They are Super Mario The Galactic Journey and Super Mario The Collapsing World. Perhaps we'll examine these ROM hacks in a future video. Star Revenge Redone is a remake of the original Star Revenge 1 hack. The creator, BroDoot, even remade this hack a second time in 2020. In total, BroDoot has created at least 28 ROM hacks, and he's often compared to K's in online discourse. We'll likely be revisiting BroDoot's ROM hacks in future videos. This version of Star Revenge was released in 2013. The hack contains 13 courses with 106 stars spread across a vast hub world. Super Mario 64 hacking actually has quite a history. One of the earliest full-level hacks known to have existed is called Super Mario 64 The Missing Stars. It was developed by Ferberator, aka Massian, largely in a program called Toad Tools 64, which is the legacy hacking suite for Mario 64. The hack departs from the traditional Mario 64 hub world and level setup, as it consists of a series of challenge rooms where players will pick up stars rather than fleshed out levels. For some time, Toad's Tool 64 was the go-to hacking tool, and with a series of other related tools allowed players to import models and set up goals and position objects within their hack. These days, it will not launch in many modern Windows 10 installations, and it has largely been replaced by a new toolset. Modern Super Mario 64 hacking consists of using Super Mario 64 ROM Manager version 1 to import models and other assets into the ROM. Super Mario Editor version 2.2.1 to also import assets and make various tweaks to the ROM and variable settings within the game. Quad 64 version 0.2 Beta Build 5, which is a level editor and object positioner for designing your hack courses. Super Mario Paint version 0.36 for vertex painting, SEQ64 for creating Mario 64 MIDIs to add custom music to your hacks, Texture 64 for modifying, adding, and replacing textures within your ROM, and last, Super Mario 64 Text Manager, which allows you to change the messages in various text boxes throughout the game. These aren't the only tools available for Super Mario 64 hacking, but they will get you started. Sonic Chaos was known as Sonic the Hedgehog 3 before being renamed Sonic and Tails in Japan and Sonic Chaos everywhere else. It's unknown why they didn't stick with the Sonic 3 name. However, we can speculate that since the game came out well before the Genesis version of Sonic 3, Sega wanted to save that name for the Genesis project. Like Sonic 2's 8-bit version, the game was developed by Aspect, taking over from Ancient, who developed the first Sonic 8-bit outing and by this time was deep into the development of the Streets of Rage series. There's a pre-release version of Sonic Chaos's box art available on the Sonic Retro Wiki. It shows Sonic and Tails holding hands as they run towards the viewer. The art perfectly fits with the North American box art for Sonic 1 through 3, which makes us believe it was probably drawn by Greg Martin, the legendary artist who did the American covers for Sonic 1 through 3. Though to my knowledge, there is no definitive proof he did this piece. But let's be real, it was probably him. I mean, he did do the final cover. Greg for sure did this art. It's of Sonic soaring through the clouds with his rocket boots while Tails watches, and Robotnik sneers with a Chaos Emerald. There's quite a lot of official, classically styled Sonic art for both the Japanese and American releases of Sonic Chaos, and this art doesn't get the attention of the art from the mainline series, so sadly, it isn't as well preserved. A side effect of Yuji Naka and Hirokazu Yasuhara coming to America to work on Sonic 2 and 3 is that you have this split in the series, whereby we have several developers in Japan who worked on a few games in the series for the Master System and Game Gear, as well as the games Sonic CD and Knuckles Chaotix. And these developers added their own reoccurring touches to the series, such as Toot Toot Sonic Warrior being shared between Sonic 2 8-bit, Sonic CD, and Sonic Chaos itself. A version of Metallic Madness music is also shared between all three games. There are also certain shared graphics and an art style between Sonic CD and Knuckles Chaotix, and of course the inclusion of the Super Peel-Out here in Sonic Chaos, though it was never adopted in the mainline series, which was developed in America. In fact, the creator of Metal Sonic, Kazuki Hoshino, serves as the creative director of Sonic Team today. And his credits include art on both Sonic CD and Knuckles Chaotix, explaining the similar art assets in addition to Metal Sonic being in both games. Sonic Chaos was also recreated as a fan game mimicking the art style of Sonic Mania. It was created partially by YouTuber A+ Start, or Andy Collins, who is best known for the Son of a Glitch series here on YouTube. Development got as far as a demo of Turquoise Hill Zone, which was well received. Unfortunately, development of the game seems to have fallen off. Sonic Triple Trouble introduces a new antagonist to the series, Knack the Weasel, or Fang the Sniper in Japan. Knack was designed by Shinichi Higashi, also known as Tuma, a well-known character artist in Japan that worked for Sega at the time. The name Jet was considered for Knack. The design of his nose almost looks like the front of a jet if you squint real hard. That's probably where the name came from. Ultimately, the name Jet would be given to a Sonic Riders character named Jet the Hawk. Interesting to note that Higashi also designed a popular line of vinyl figures, several of which sport a similar design to Fang. Check out this magazine scan of the Great Turquoise Zone, showing an unused cutscene. Knack sees Sonic and pulls a gun on him, a pretty realistic looking pistol at that. I suppose the reason this didn't make it into the final game speaks for itself, although that wouldn't stop Sega all those years later in 2005. Here's an early screenshot of the 3D special stages, minus the plane, which hadn't been implemented yet. Judging from this screenshot, earlier in development, the snowboard from Robotnik Winter was supposed to be used as a surfboard in Great Turquoise Zone. Check out these two screenshots of a prototype peel-out animation, which has a yellow trail behind it. Sonic Triple Trouble has a bunch of promotional art for it too. There's this unused cover by Greg Martin. Check out this art of Sonic and Tails sitting down. This promotional calendar was released for the game in Japan, sporting its Japanese title, Sonic and Tails 2. Speaking of which, Sonic Triple Trouble at one point was going to be called Sonic Chaos 2, at least here in the West. Okay, here's a weird one. And to be clear, I didn't check the manual myself, but it does seem to be an accepted fact online that the Brazilian manual for Sonic Triple Trouble mentions that Knuckles is on vacation, and the character in the game that looks like Knuckles is actually his younger brother, Crucules, or Cruckles? I'm not really sure. Upon finding this out, I googled it, and apparently there's quite a few Sonic fans making designs and stories for this character, which by some stretch could be considered an official Sonic character. I don't know why the manual writer decided to make this change. The only possible reason I can come up with that isn't entirely out there is that Sonic Triple Trouble was released between Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles. Maybe they wanted the canon to line up better, since by release schedules, Sonic Triple Trouble would take place between the two Genesis outings, although I admit that's a stretch. In spite of no official Master System port, in 2009 a port of Triple Trouble was made to the Master System. The port was made by Hacking Scene member Glitch. While the conversion to the Master System does mean the game can make use of fewer colors, the larger resolution and ability to play on TV make this a fair trade-off. The zone, Robotnik Winter, marks one of the few times the Robotnik name was used in Japan for Dr. Eggman, though he's still called Dr. Eggman in the manual. So from the perspective of a Japanese player, they would not know the name Robotnik referenced the Eggman. For Sega's Consumer Electronics Show in 1994, Sega hired Lou Rawls, who was a soul singer, best known for his 1976 hit You'll Never Find Another Love Like Mine. They hired him to host the promotional video they would hand out out to potential buyers. The video is a pretty surreal look at 90s Sega culture mixed with Lou Rawls for some reason, but watching him feign enthusiasm for Sonic Triple Trouble while sounding like he's reading a 3rd grade book report, probably kinda like me actually, makes it all worth it. As with Sonic Chaos, there is a fan game for Sonic Triple Trouble, created by sometimes voice of the channel, Noah Copeland. The best part is, unlike Sonic Chaos's fan game outing, this one's actually finished and ready to play for Windows and Android. The reimagining is among the best fan game projects out there, and well worth a playthrough. On a personal note, Meta Junglerilla is actually called Meta Jungle. In a case of a reverse Mandela effect, y'all have been brainwashed into thinking it was Meta Junglerilla. But it was never Meta Junglerilla. It was Meta Jungle. It was always Meta Jungle. I remember it being Meta Jungle. My theory is when Noah Copeland decided to recreate Sonic Triple Trouble instead of G-Sonic, he split the timeline in two, and the consequences of that decision rippled forwards and backwards in time. I'm the only one that remembers the truth.
Welcome to another episode of Game Facts Special. I am Alec from the SQG Review Show, and I am here to drop facts about the Super Mario Bros NES/Famicom games at a rapid-fire pace. Let's-a go, as Mario would say. The original Super Mario Bros. Was obviously designed by Shigeru Miyamoto, but Takashi Tezuka also had a major hand in the game's development, and the team used a lot of their technical know-how from developing Excitebike, Devil's World, and Kung Fu in order to give Super Mario Bros. That side-scrolling athletic appeal that wasn't quite as common as it is nowadays. Definitely not the first side-scrolling game, the design philosophy of Super Mario Bros. Was to allow for players to strategize how to traverse these at the time long expansive distances, as most platformers at the time were just single-screen games. It's also worth noting that another Nintendo Legends first entry, being The Legend of Zelda, was developed alongside Super Mario Bros., with Miyamoto and Tezuka also overseeing development of that game, but that's a story for another day. And while the success of Super Mario Bros. Is no small feat, selling a whopping 58 million units in the console's lifetime, however, to this day, it is still one of the best-selling video games of all time. That's most likely in part due to it not only being a launch title that was the reason to get an NES console for many kids, but as a pack-in title for some NES console bundles that just sealed the deal for its success, still ranking at number 6 as of 2021. It is also Nintendo's second best-selling game of all time, with it eventually being dethroned by Wii Sports. It makes perfect sense as that was the game that got even the non-gamers to buy a Nintendo Wii console. History does repeat itself, and leave it to Nintendo to of course capitalize on that success. Super Mario Bros. 2, better known in North America as Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, because Nintendo released this game as Super Mario Bros. 2 for Super players for the Famicom Disk System in 1986, this device was an expansion for the Famicom that read floppy disks, being able to do a lot more than the base Famicom itself could do, and this game was just one of these games on this new format. Shigeru Miyamoto did not have as much to do with this as the first, as he was focused on The Legend of Zelda at the time, so the directional responsibilities were handed over to Takashi Tezuka, with brand new graphics, a new power-up that actually killed players, and a more forgiving yet still brutal life system that only allowed you to begin at the beginning of the world you died in after a game over, as opposed to the original game's restart the entire game after a game over mentality unless you put in a cheat code. Despite all that, this game was still deemed too difficult by Howard Phillips of Nintendo of America, his reasoning being that its unfair difficulty would not sell that well in the US gaming market. I don't know how a sequel to the best-selling NES game would not sell that well, but that's why North America wouldn't get a taste of it until it was remade for the SNES Super Mario All-Stars compilation title in 1993 with its Lost Levels moniker. And unlike the first game where Mario and Luigi were pretty much identical save for different graphics in two-player mode, Lost Levels, however, opted to be single-player only and made Mario and Luigi significantly different characters, with Luigi having higher jumps but less traction when running on the ground, which is a very innovative idea that would be a mainstay for some Super Mario games released later on, like Super Mario Bros. 2 USA. Speaking of which, released in 1988, Super Mario Bros. 2 USA, say it with me because you've all likely heard this fun fact a million times over, was originally released in Japan as Yum Kojo Doki Doki Panic as Nintendo's 1987 tie-in game to promote the Yum Kojo TV festival, with this game featuring the festival's mascots. Overused fun fact tidbit over. The more interesting part was that even that was not how Super Mario Bros. 2 USA's story began. No, it goes back even further before that Kojo Festival, with Kensuke Tanabe developing a prototype game that emphasized vertical scrolling, which is an evolution of Super Mario Bros. Idea since there was none in the original game, or the Lost levels, as those just had horizontal scrolling. The prototype had all the core actions in it, like lifting objects, throwing them, and even stacking them at times, but one feature that did not make it into either Doki Doki Panic nor Super Mario Bros. 2 USA was the planned 2-player co-op, which is the second Super Mario Bros. Game to neglect multiplayer features. What the hell? Anyways, as the story goes, Nintendo converted Kojo Doki Doki Panic into Super Mario Bros. 2 USA and released it in 1988, and apparently liked the conversion so much they brought it back over to Japan 1 month later after the North American release. Some may ask why they would do that even though they already have Doki Doki Panic, but honestly, with it being a licensed game for that specific festival, it makes more sense to repackage it with the more familiar Mario characters as just Super Mario USA, and ranks as the 5th best-selling NES game of all time, totaling over a whopping 7 million copies sold, so it was a success despite the absence of the familiar enemies of Super Mario Bros. Plus the Shy Guys become almost as iconic as the Goombas and Koopas nowadays, and things like the ability to walk through doors and pick up objects and throw them were carried over to Super Mario Bros. 3, the final installment of the Super Mario Bros. NES/Famicom games. Released in 1988 on the Famicom, development of this game actually began shortly after the Super Mario Bros. 2 for Super Players was released in 1986, but North America didn't see the NES version until 1990 due to a ROM chip shortage needed for NES cartridges. The Famicom disk system didn't really have this problem. However, it did see a release in 1989 in a limited capacity as part of the PlayChoice 10 arcade cabinet. And as polished of a 2D platformer Super Mario Bros. 3 is, that almost wasn't the case because the development team originally wanted to play around with an isometric perspective, but thankfully they had the sense to abandon that idea due to difficulty with positioning jumps. They weren't wrong. Just play the SNES Super Mario RPG Legend of the 7 Stars and imagine the overworld platforming sections being an entire game. That would be exhausting. This is the first Super Mario game to implement an overworld as a means of selecting levels, with instances of non-linearity, whereas levels can be skipped if you take the right path, and game overs do make you start at the beginning of the world, but beating a fortress would permanently be beaten, and would unlock the overworld gate, so you can almost pick up where you left off. And besides King Koopa, later known as Bowser, this game features 7 Koopalings as bosses with their own unique attacks at the end of each world, so you're not fighting variations of the same boss like you were in Super Mario Bros. 1 and Lost levels. Speaking of the Koopalings, they're all named after various celebrities, mostly musicians. Wendy after the frontwoman Wendy O. Williams of the Plasmatics, Lemmy after Lemmy Kilmister, lead singer and bassist for Motorhead, Iggy after Iggy Pop of the Stooges, Roy after rock and roll legend Roy Orbison, makes sense because of the sunglasses, Ludwig after, you guessed it by his hairpiece, classical music composer Ludwig van Beethoven, and Morton being the only one named after a non-musician but instead a talk show host being Morton Downey Jr. I personally never heard of him, but still a cool reference. As for Larry, he's the only Koopaling not named after anyone. He's not named after the talk show host Larry King, he was just named Larry because he looks like a Larry, according to Dave Brooks of Nintendo of America, who named all the Koopalings. To that I say, okay, whatever works. And lastly, Super Mario Bros. 3, despite being a later NES title, is the 3rd best-selling NES game of all time, only behind Duck Hunt at number 2, and of course Super Mario Bros. 1 at number 1. It might owe some of its success to advertising in the climax of the movie The Wizard, which was released before this game's North American release. And lastly, all these games were remade on Super Mario All-Stars for the SNES in 1993, with a completely redone soundtrack and visuals that add to the respective game's atmosphere. There was also Super Mario Bros. Deluxe on Game Boy Color that had Super Mario Bros. 1 and the Lost levels, but it was in a cropped resolution and at times omitted levels completely. The Game Boy Advance re-released Super Mario Bros. On the classic NES series for GBA, and Lost Levels got Japan only released as part of the GBA Famicom mini-series in 2004. and Super Mario Bros 2 USA and 3 were remade in Super Mario Advance and Super Mario Advance 4 respectively, with Super Mario Advance 4 adding an e-reader functionality that allowed players to access brand new levels featuring all the mechanics from the entirety of the Super Mario Advance re-release series, except for 3 because that was based on Yoshi's Island.
The Sonic franchise went through a massive shift in the late 90s. In order to keep up with the times and appeal to new players, Sega wanted its flagship franchise to evolve and embrace the next generation of gaming. At the time, this meant venturing into the lush, polygonal world of 3D, and leaving the fast-paced 2D side-scrolling that put the series on the map far behind it. So, that's exactly what they did. Their first foray into three-dimensional Sonic, and what seemed to be timed as the company's answer to the juggernaut that was Super Mario 64, was Sonic 3D Blast. But let's face it, that wasn't real 3D, and other 3D Sonic experiences were accomplished with varying degrees of success. However, while 3D Sonic games don't have the best reputation, they did result in the development of a fascinating game engine. One that somehow still manages to be impressive almost a decade later. The appropriately named Hedgehog engine. The creative mind behind the Hedgehog engine was a Sonic team member named Yoshihisa Hashimoto. This dev got his start at Sega fresh out of college as an enemy programmer on Sonic's 1998 true 3D debut, Sonic Adventure. Following Sonic Adventure's release, Hashimoto went on to contribute to many Sonic games, serving as a programmer on everything from Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, thanks for the Tiny Chow Garden, to Sonic N for the N-Gage. Altogether, Hashimoto is credited on 9 Sonic games. With all of that experience, as well as his knowledge as a lifelong Sonic fan, it was his dream to work on Sonic games long before he started working at Sega. Hashimoto developed some big ideas. He noted where the 3D incarnations of Sonic went wrong, and how the series could improve as it moved forward, primarily in the realm of presentation. In 2005, he got his opportunity. Sega wanted to start development on a new game built to take advantage of the 7th gen consoles, and they called on Hashimoto to direct the new project. However, before work could begin on what would become Sonic Unleashed, Sonic Team needed a comprehensive game development environment that could accomplish a few things. In order to bring Hashimoto's vision to life, it needed to be able to produce pre-rendered CGI film quality 3D graphics, targeting Pixar visuals, and it needed to do that at the breakneck speed of a Sonic game. Their first and most important discovery was that, despite all of the cool tricks modern games used, like HDR, advanced shaders, and normal and shadow maps, something still felt off. There was a flatness that had to be fixed, and the solution to the problem became apparent as Hashimoto and the team observed thousands of pre-rendered 3D images. They discovered that the secret to the 3D-ness of the higher quality images came down to one thing: an incredibly taxing lighting technique called global illumination. In real life, light and shadow aren't just an on or off situation as they were in early 3D video games. The true scientific nature of light is pretty complicated, since it has aspects of both waves and particles. But we'll save the complicated stuff for Bill Nye, and simplify things for the purpose of this video by just describing their particle aspects. When light particles are emitted onto a surface, they don't just create shadow. They also absorb and reflect the colors of the surfaces they come into contact with. The intensity of this effect depends on the materials absorbing the light and the distance and direction of the light source itself. And it compounds by orders of magnitude as those particles continuously bounce into and off of other objects. These principles are what power modern ray tracing implementations. But as you can probably imagine, the calculations needed to do this in real time were far beyond the capabilities of game engines and hardware in the mid-2000s. The absence of a global illumination effect is what was causing the flatness Hashimoto observed. There wasn't an accurate representation of global illumination in place. Hashimoto went over these findings in detail at a GDC presentation in 2009, and Sonic enthusiast Sifex broke those complex concepts down even more in this video, which we highly recommend checking out. Due to having limited experience and understanding of ray tracing, radiosity, and photon mapping, Sonic Team had to go their own way and create a custom method for calculating their global illumination. Their first attempt was a light model system that treated light particles similarly to how they act in real life, but tests of that system generated an infinite number of calculations, which made it impossible to use. The second calculation method, what they called a light network, cut down on calculations significantly by only using a set number of particles, or rays, and storing that data in smaller, easier to process microfacets and textiles baked into every object in the game. This information was also used to create the Hedgehog engine's light fields. This feature divides a stage into different sized cells, applies the color data from the GI calculations to the vertices of those cells, and casts that color onto Sonic as he zips through a level. This is the secret sauce that makes Sonic look like he's actually in the stage, instead of the strange effect we saw in the previous 3D games. While light networks streamlined their calculation load, they were still massive undertakings. In his GDC talk and other interviews, like this one with Sonic Channel, Hashimoto talked about the immense processing power needed to get the global illumination calculations for their pre-baked solution just right. With a single PC, it would have taken as long as 6 months to complete the calculations of a single stage. To overcome this hurdle, Sonic Team utilized distributed computing to share the computational load across 100 PCs. This reduced the time needed for calculations from 6 months to 1 or 2 days. Well, at least it did after some upgrades. They had to increase the RAM and storage of their PCs and improve the power system in their office. Prior to that upgrade, using anything that required power during calculations, even a simple appliance like a coffee maker, would overload the system and blow the circuit breaker. But hey, they got there eventually. Now, it's not like games weren't attempting to do some kind of global illumination at the time. Games like Half-Life, Quake, Max Payne, and Halo 3 all had their own implementations of this effect. You can learn more about the history of global illumination across gaming history in this presentation, which we'll link in the description. While those are all impressive in their own right, they all had one big advantage. None of them had to deal with Sonic's speed. This is part of what makes the Hedgehog engine special. Rather than loading in all of the GI information at once, the Hedgehog engine uses a custom tool called GI Atlas to group smaller chunks of information in a way that eliminates wasted memory and reduces time spent searching for data on the disk. Combined with methods implemented to optimize streaming performance, Sonic can run through a stage at max speed while the lighting effects remain incredibly convincing. According to Sega, the Hedgehog engine was in development for 3 years, but it continued to change long after that. As evidenced by this X thread by programmer and hobbyist reverse engineer Sajidor78, Sonic Team refactored and even rewrote parts of the Hedgehog engine during the development of subsequent games for the sake of flexibility and other improvements. Whether or not improvements were actually made for Sonic Generations or Lost World is definitely up for debate. But any changes that were made to the engine were done without the supervision of its primary creator. Yoshihisa Hashimoto left Sega to join Square Enix in mid-2009, where he went on to spearhead the creation of the Luminous engine. Several years and several Hedgehog Engine games later, Sega announced the existence of Hedgehog Engine 2, alongside the reveal of Sonic Forces. According to CG World's article discussing HE2, the engine took about 3 years to complete, and its development was carried out simultaneously with the development of the new Sonic title, just like the first Hedgehog Engine. The Hedgehog Engine 2 improves over the previous version of the engine by including physically based rendering, dynamic lighting, and other features that create a more realistic look without sacrificing the unique style of Sonic characters. After Forces, HE2 was used in Sonic Origins, Sonic Frontiers, and it's being used for the Shadow content in Shadow X Sonic Generations. However, it was also used for Sega games that didn't explicitly, or at least only, feature Sonic, something its predecessor never did. HE2 was utilized for Mario and Sonic at the Rio 2016 Olympic Games and the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games, Olympic Games Tokyo 2020, the official video game, Sakura Wars, and Puyo Puyo Tetris 2. Despite being custom built for the Blue Blur, not every Sonic game released after Sonic Unleashed made use of the Hedgehog engine. For instance, the most recently released Sonic game at the time of this video's production, Sonic Superstars, was built in Unity using physics code carried over from Sonic Mania's retro engine. While Sega itself might not have gotten the most out of the Hedgehog engine, Sonic fans and dedicated modders definitely have. There's an entire community that has formed around modding the Hedgehog engine, which has created everything from fixes for certain games, such as Project Re-Rainbow, to perhaps not legally distinct enough character models. For all the love, wackiness, and possible lawsuits being put into Sonic games thanks to HE modders, at least we can thank them for keeping things interesting and alive. At least for the moment. As of 2024, it seems the winds of change are blowing at Sega once more, and things aren't looking good for the Hedgehog engine. As more and more of their projects move over to Unreal Engine 5, the word on the street is that Sonic projects going forward will also ditch the Hedgehog engine in favor of Epic's universally accepted game engine. In fact, multiple sources have announced that an Unreal Engine 5 remake of Sonic Heroes is already in development. Does that mean that the Hedgehog engine is gonna go high up on a shelf at Sega, right next to Seaman and Space Channel 5, only to be forgotten forever? It's too early to tell at this point, but the engine's future does seem pretty bleak. For now, all we can do is appreciate all the great games. And we guess the bad ones too, that it has given us over the years. Mario's villainous doppelganger, Wario, has been in our lives for decades now, providing us with plenty of bizarre, foul-smelling adventures in games that run the gamut of genres. However, the most iconic of these games would probably have to be WarioWare, the madcap minigame extravaganzas that only get weirder the longer you play them. There's no doubt that WarioWare games are incredibly strange and unique, but how did they come to be? We hope you're ready to get weird and find out in Making the Madness, Developing WarioWare Games, Game Facts Special, Origins. WarioWare wouldn't have been possible in the first place without the creation of Nintendo's most peculiar mascot. The first appearance of the mustachioed menace was in the 1992 Game Boy game Super Mario Land 2: 6 Golden Coins, where he served as the primary villain. Wario's dastardly deeds proved to be the perfect mirror to Mario's generally good intentions. The character of Wario was created and designed by Hiroji Kiyotake, an iconic game designer for Nintendo, who has been an integral part of the company since he joined in 1983, having also played a part in designing Metroid 2 and Dr. Mario. Surprisingly, the character's name wasn't created just by simply flipping the M in Mario to a W. Kiyotake-san discussed the creation of Wario in a 1992 developer interview with the official Nintendo guidebook that coincided with Super Mario Land 2's launch. According to him, they came up with the idea for his name first. The character was to be a bad guy, and the Japanese word for bad is warui, which they extrapolated into Wario. You might notice that the evil doppelganger for Luigi is Waluigi, which also plays on the Warui theme. While his debut was subject to the limitations of the Game Boy hardware, this appearance did establish his W cap, crazy eyes, pointy shoes, and his iconic pointy mustache. The character proved to be popular enough with fans that he starred in no less than 6 games between 1994 and 2003. The majority of these games were traditional platformers like fans had come to expect from the Mario series. But a one-off game made under the table by a team of inspired developers would go on to largely define Wario's place in the video game industry and in Nintendo canon. Inspired by creativity. In the year 2000, Nintendo released a series of games. They were more like functional creativity software, called Mario Artist for the Nintendo 64 and its DD Dynamic Drive add-on. Intended as the spiritual successor to the less sophisticated Mario Paint on the SNES, Mario Artist consisted of Paint Studio, Talent Studio, and Polygon Studio. But Polygon Studio is the one that helped spawn WarioWare. With the disk drive software, players could design, create, and animate 3D models. However, these models were not only intended to impress your friends, they were also used in Sound Bomber, which presented players with a series of bite-sized minigames that found creative ways to use the models you created. This novel system went on to inspire Nintendo's R&D 1 development team to create an entire game based solely around this idea of microgames. Goro Abe, a game designer and programmer, was one of the 6 members of R&D 1's WarioWare All-Star team. Abe even directly references the team when asked how the concept for WarioWare came to be in an interview with the early 2000s gaming news outlet Kikizo. Designing for quantity and silliness. But in order to create enough of these microgames to fill out an entire game, you'd need an awful lot. So, how did R&D 1 manage to make more than 200 of these? By using a simple yet inventive system. Anytime a member of the game's development had an idea for a microgame, they would write it down on a post-it note and leave it on Hirofumi Matsuoka's desk, who was serving as the game's director. Whoever came up with an idea that wasn't deemed too obscene or too Japanese were then responsible for designing and creating their microgame, which led to an interesting phenomenon that proved to be the backbone of the WarioWare experience. Every game had a distinct visual style and concept, and no 2 games looked the same unless they were designed by the same person. In a game with over 200 of these things, you could play for a long time before you ever saw a similar game, which is pretty impressive. Early on in the process, when the team discussed who or what should headline the game, Wario was quickly suggested. Who better to be the face of a game as unhinged and disjointed as this than a character who, according to the project supervisor Yoshio Sakamoto, quote, is always doing stupid things and is really idiotic. Made in secret. Surprisingly, early development for the first Wario game went on in secret. When asked by Kikizo in the same interview if it was difficult to get WarioWare Inc. Mega Microgames approved, the project supervisor Yoshio Sakamoto said, "Actually, to tell you the truth, we made the game secretly. We were talking about the idea of the game with some other people on the team, and then we just decided to make it without telling our manager at the time." An incredibly bold move for a team that works for a company as rigid as Nintendo, but their gambit ultimately paid off. Their manager reportedly just said, "Okay," and development continued. Marketing insanity. When the game was completed and it was then time to market the game, Shigeru Miyamoto himself planned the game's marketing. Trying to sell a game as unconventional as WarioWare was no small feat, but the legendary member of Nintendo thought a lot about it, and he wanted to showcase how WarioWare's unusual gameplay made it stand out. This game, perhaps more than any other at the time, was perfectly suited to the Game Boy Advance, as it was designed for quick pickup and play sessions. In the end, he came up with the tagline, "More, Shorter, Faster," which was so prominent on the game's Japanese box art that it was bigger than the actual title. The tagline was unfortunately not used for the Western box art, which instead showcased Wario's weird mug, along with the rest of the game's eclectic cast. Great success and creating a legacy. WarioWare Inc. Mega Micro Games was an unmitigated hit. Most video game outlets reviewed the game favorably, and it has maintained a Metascore of 89 on Metacritic since its release in 2003. Just about every review praised the game for its innovation and short burst gameplay, and Nintendo always knows when they have something special on their hands. A multiplayer-themed remake of Mega Micro Games called Mega Party Games for the GameCube came that same year, and the WarioWare dynasty was born. Hirofumi Matsuoka left Nintendo after the original game's completion, but Goro Abe stepped up from his programmer and game designer role to become the director of every other entry in the series, except for the DSi's WarioWare Snapped, meaning all of those crazy post-its go on his desk now. Yoshio Sakamoto also upgraded from a supervisor and has been a producer on the series since WarioWare Twisted released in 2004. In addition to the founding members of the WarioWare series at Nintendo R&D 1, which was abolished and rebuilt as the Nintendo Software Planning and Development Division in 2003, the renowned Nintendo second-party development studio Intelligent Systems has participated in every game's development since Mega Party Games on the GameCube, with employees Taku Sugioka and Naoko Mori serving the series as co-directors and designers. Fun fact, Intelligent Systems also developed Mario Paint for Nintendo, the prequel to Mario Artist, which contains the microgames that inspired WarioWare. Every Nintendo console and handheld since the first game's release has had an installment of WarioWare, and each of those also found ways to make use of the innovative features of its hardware, or introduced peripherals to create new and interesting gameplay. As of now, there are over 1,300 microgames across every entry in the series, and each one was created with the post-it system that the original development team created. Here's a quick rundown of the other 9 games that currently make up the WarioWare franchise. WarioWare Twisted, the 2004 sequel to Mega Micro Games on the GBA. This title featured an innovative cartridge that contained a piezoelectric gyroscope, which unlocked tilting and twisting microgames. WarioWare Touched. Touched also released in 2004, but now called new hardware its home, the Nintendo DS. It utilized the handheld's dual screens, lower touchscreen, and built-in microphone for its new set of microgames. WarioWare Smooth Moves. 2006 saw the release of WarioWare Smooth Moves. This entry came to the Wii and made use of the console's movement-focused input methods. However, some microgames also required the use of the Wii's nunchuck controller attachment. WarioWare Snapped. WarioWare Snapped from 2008 was a digitally distributed entry that made its debut on the Nintendo DSi's DSiWare service. This is one of the smallest WarioWare games, with only 20 microgames, and it used the DSi's camera to create a silhouette of the player in-game. WarioWare DIY. 2009's WarioWare DIY was a title that focused on user-generated content, with tools that allowed players to build their own microgames that could be shared with other players using the Nintendo Wi-Fi connection service on the Nintendo DS. WarioWare DIY Showcase. WarioWare DIY Showcase was the digital download companion game to DIY that was released on the Wii and allowed players to play games created in the DS game using the Wii Remote. Game & Wario. Game & Wario is a Wii U game that was released in 2013 and serves as a spin-off to the main WarioWare franchise. It has fewer minigames that are longer in length, and they all make use of the features on the Wii U gamepad. WarioWare Gold. The Nintendo 3DS got WarioWare Gold in 2018, which functioned as a best-of for the WarioWare series. It had 300 microgames in total, with a mix of old ones from previous games as well as new ones. Gold is also the first game in the series to have full voice acting. Mario's English voice actor, Charles Martinet, voices Wario 2 after all. WarioWare Get It Together. The latest WarioWare game is WarioWare Get It Together on the Nintendo Switch. Released in 2021, Get It Together features surprising new gameplay and allows you to play through each microgame as any member of the WarioWare cast, each of which has its own gameplay and abilities.
As far as Super Mario games go, the Mario Strikers series is just about as cult classic as you can get. The first two games, Super Mario Strikers and Mario Strikers Charge, were developed by Next Level Games. The recent game Mario Strikers Battle League has continued the tradition and is also developed by Next Level Games. According to developer interviews, one of the major focuses of Mario Strikers games was to give the Mario characters a rougher edge. This manifests in the game through the aggressive style of play. These aggressive depictions of the characters were further amplified for the sequel Mario Strikers Charged. When developing Mario Strikers, Next Level Games looked at other arcade-style football games on the market. In an interview with GameXplain, Mike mentions that the power-ups and Super Strikes were inspired or in response to reviewing Sega Soccer Slam. The team also focused on keeping the core of soccer or football intact while removing the slower aspects of the sport. This is the reason behind the inclusion of the electric fence. Allowing the ball to go outside of bounds would have slowed down the gameplay and would have required a cutscene and a play break. A Super Mario Strikers beta build exists and features many changes from the final version of the game. In it, Mario and company sport different looks close to their main series depictions, and lacking some of the aggressive tone they would get further along in development. One of the more humorous things to come from these games is a meme, the infamous Waluigi crotch chop, in which Waluigi scores a goal and forms a V with his hands and chops at his torso on either side of his crotch. Next Level Games expected Nintendo to veto the animation, but the veto never came, leading to his legendary meme. Mike Englehart commented in a recent interview with GameXplain that Next Level Games had attempted to create a tornado crowd riot for Mario Strikers Charge, but it remained unfinished. Ultimately, the tornado and crowd riots did not return in Mario Strikers Charged. In the upcoming Mario Strikers Battle League, Luigi has a tornado attack move, which Mike speculated may have originated with the early attempt at creating a similar tornado in Charged. There are conflicting reports on how much focus was in developing motion controls for Strikers Charged. In a 2005 interview, Mike Englehart mentions that they tried everything they could think of with motion control during the pre-production. He goes on to say that they implemented hitting motion controls very quickly and did not revisit the idea of adding additional motion controls. However, when asked a similar question by GameXplain, Mike mentioned that Nintendo had directed them not to focus on motion controls. A last note about director Mike Englehart is that he actually owns a working custom Mario Strikers Charged arcade cabinet. Judging from the photographs, it's quite the piece of artwork and is probably a lot of fun to play too. In 2006 and 2007, Next Level Games worked on a project that could be considered a spin-off called Super Mario Spikers. The game would have been Mario's take on volleyball and would have pushed the envelope even further when it comes to portraying the Mushroom Kingdom characters with aggression, incorporating WWE-style wrestling moves into the game of volleyball. Some of the leaked animations include attacks where players are jumped on and slammed into the ground. It's thought that for Nintendo, these acts of violence were just too out of character for Mario and the crew. Mario Strikers Battle League is the first Mario Strikers game in 15 years. New mechanics in the game include Team Tackle, where tackling your own team member sends them into the other side of the playfield. Special moves return in the form of Hyper Strikes, which can be performed once a strike orb is collected. The game's music was composed by Chad York and Darren Radke. Both had previously scored Strikers Charged all those years ago. As many Nintendo titles do, the game recycles assets from previous Mario games. Most of the character audio is reused from Mario Kart 8, Mario Sports Mix, and Super Mario 3D Land. On January 4th, 2021, Nintendo announced that they bought Next Level Games and brought them in as an official first-party studio. Next Level Games has been working with Nintendo exclusively for most of a decade, having developed all 3 Mario Strikers games, 2 Luigi's Mansion games, and several other well-received Nintendo games, and their ownership cements that relationship for years to come.
¿Qué tal, amigos aficionados? Aquí está el partido de semifinales entre los eternos archirrivales. Aquí está llegando en este momento Mario. Entra al campo. Vean ustedes, se lleva el balón. Aquí está jugando hacia la derecha. Lo pierde Mario. Viene Mario nuevamente, lo recupera y se la va a llevar. Está jugando con el balón por el centro. Se lleva uno, se lleva el otro, se lleva...
Ever heard of the Sonic the Hedgehog 2 book or manga that was only ever released in Japan? It's true! English-speaking Sonic fans never got this wonderfully strange story in their own language. Until now. So, if you've ever wanted to learn the story of how God-type Sonic took on the drunken wizard Eggman, all to save the Princess Amy Rose from petrification and marriage, find out in the Sonic 2 manga, translated, Game Facts Special. This is Sonic the Hedgehog book, a pretty unique storybook strategy guide hybrid that was released in 1992 as a tie-in to Sonic the Hedgehog 2. It features Sonic stories that take place in prehistoric and medieval times, which are separated by some information about the new game and Sega's console offerings at the time. It's a delightful little time capsule of a product, but before we dig all the way into it, let's talk a little bit about how the Sonic 2 manga came to be in the first place. The stories in this book were conceptualized by Kenji Terada, a notable writer/director of many anime series and films throughout the 80s and 90s, and written as well as illustrated by Sango Morimoto, creator of the Adventures of Taro series. This is the same team responsible for creating the serialized Sonic manga for the Shogaku Ninensei magazine, which was published between 1992 and 1994. While this was still early in Sonic's reign as a pop culture icon, it wasn't uncommon for Sega to commission manga to tie into the game's releases. They did it in 1991 with the 3-volume Sonic the Hedgehog story comic published in Mega Drive Fan Magazine, which introduced readers to the character as well as the story of the game. So, when Sonic 2 went into production, it only made sense to get another manga out there for Sonic fans. However, rather than just put out a singular manga on their own, Sega partnered with Japanese mega publisher Shogakukan to feature Sonic manga across their many primary school magazines. This effectively allowed Sonic to reach Japanese kids aged 6 to 12 across 7 different magazines, with manga presented in a number of different styles. Many of these manga have become extremely obscure or entirely lost to time, but great work by people like Pengi over on Sonic Retro has ensured that at least some of these can be enjoyed in the modern day. Going back to Sonic the Hedgehog book, it mostly serves as an origin story of sorts for the Blue Blur, but it also touches on elements of the sequel game that were expected to be included at the time it was created. However, this version of Sonic is far different from the Sonic we know. For those who are unfamiliar with Sonic manga's incarnations, Kenji Terada's story concept follows a mild-mannered blue hedgehog named Nicky, who turns into the hero Sonic the Hedgehog to fight Eggman. Several characters from the Sonic games were also introduced through these stories, but we'll get to those a little later. And now, let's dive into the manga. The front cover of the manga states that it contains the latest information on the popular Sonic 2 game, while promising to be an absolutely fun, extra special manga spread across 30 pages. The index page shows the contents of the book, as you'd expect, but it also has a message for the reader. This book was created for those who love Sonic, and therefore want to see a slightly different Sonic. Sonic lived a long time ago. If you know this story, you will never forget Sonic. Oh, you'll definitely never forget what you're about to see. On the very first page of the manga, we're greeted by the title and objective for this story: Sonic the Hedgehog, the birth of Sonic the Hedgehog. Defeat the Dark Emperor. We're then introduced to an animal skin-wearing version of Eggman from 5,000 years ago, who is referred to in this universe as a sorcerer, and the Dark Emperor of the Hedgehog Kingdom. He's drinking sake out of the top half of a human skull, and generally just looking like the bad dude we expect him to be. Eggman's demanding more sake, or Japanese rice wine, from some bored-looking hedgehogs in the back of the frame that make up the main cast, one of which you might be familiar with already. In the middle of the hedgehog group is an early version of Amy Rose. She still acts as Nicky, or Sonic's girlfriend/romantic interest, but her look has obviously evolved over time. Next, we see Anita spilling Eggman's drink on his own head, which makes him angry enough to hit the young child with his magic staff to teach her a lesson. The 90s were a different time. As she apologizes and takes the beating, Anita and Nicky's father, Polly, dives in to save her and beg for Eggman's forgiveness. The evil sorcerer he is, Eggman takes Polly's begging as an opportunity to make an example of him, and smacks him into the air with his staff, turning him into a stone statue. Anita cries over her father as Eggman states, "This is what happens when people mess with me." A true villain. The next panel shows Nikki coming across Anita, who has ventured off by herself to cry for her father. Nikki, or Prince Nikki of the Kyukyoku family, lends her a sympathetic ear and hears out her problem. Shocked by what happened to her father, Nikki states he will take his place. That might be a confusing translation, but essentially, he's gonna go take care of business. When Anita reveals that the person who turned her father into stone was none other than Eggman, the Emperor of Darkness, Nikki spazzes out, clearly regretting his decision to get involved right off the bat. This is the cowardly, non-confrontational alter ego of Sonic after all. He tries to get out of it by saying, "I just remembered, I have something to do. Excuse me." But Anita isn't letting him off the hook that easily. She trips him up and makes sure he sticks to his word. The next page shows Eggman rolling through the land in a stone tank strapped to a T-Rex, which is being inspired to move forward by the citizen of the Hedgehog Kingdom dangling in front of him. The other members of the kingdom watch on in horror. The next panel shows the back of Eggman's tank, which is hauling a container full of all the stone hedgehogs who dare to disobey him. From on top of his impenetrable, dinosaur-powered vehicle, he says, "Boo ha ha ha! Look at this, everyone. If you disobey me, I will turn you all to stone." We also see Amy pushing Nikki to confront Eggman, but we would say he's a little more than apprehensive about the idea of stepping up to the evil sorcerer in control of a T-Rex. It turns out Nikki was right to be scared. Before he gets a chance to say anything to Eggman, the T-Rex kicks him, sending him flying through the air and smashing his head on a rock when he lands. When he wakes up, he's greeted by a white-bearded old man with a bow in his single strand of head hair. Hold on to your hats, this is where it starts to get weird. So it turns out that this kooky old man is God. He shows himself to Nikki to tell him to be brave and save everyone, but Nikki is scared. He says the guy is too strong. God then yells at Nikki for his lack of courage, saying that if he can find courage, then he will give him power. Nikki bolts up to his feet after his vision, and suddenly has the courage to put his foot down with Eggman, saying, "Eggman, get everyone back to normal, or else I, the Prince of the Hedgehog Kingdom, will never forgive you." Eggman doesn't take Nikki's demand very well, and instead of stopping to return everyone back to their non-stone selves, he turns Nikki to stone and says, "Just stay like this. I'm gonna throw you in the slime." With this, the royal family is finished. As Nikki sinks to the bottom of the water, he grapples with his situation and what God told him. It's fair to say that he's having a pretty weird day so far. He comes to the realization that believing in yourself is what gives you real power, and he suddenly feels a jolt of energy. That jolt of energy Nikki felt was his body transforming into Sonic the Hedgehog. As Sonic, he has the power to escape his stone tomb and blast up through the water, landing confidently in a tree in front of Eggman. The villain immediately has a problem with him, calling him cocky. Eggman tries to turn Sonic to stone, but he's too powerful to be petrified. He tanks the spell and mocks the villain while he throws a tantrum. The first half of the manga was a little unconventional as far as Sonic stories go, but at least we now have the Sonic-Eggman dynamic in full effect. Sonic then decides it's time to stop playing games, and he shows Eggman who's boss by hitting him with a rolling attack. Or what might be the first instance of Sonic's spin dash in any Sonic media. The attack smashes Eggman's tank, sending him and his T-Rex crashing to the floor in a dramatic explosion. The spin dash hits Eggman so hard that his animal skin clothing either disappears or flies off of his body. Either way, Eggman is now in the buff. Yep, completely naked and completely embarrassed. The hedgehogs are now pointing at him. Their eyes are popping out of their head. It's a whole thing. As the hedgehogs laugh and throw rocks at Eggman, he swears that he'll take his revenge on all of them. Even if, get this, even if I have to sell my soul to the devil. Then he jumps into an exploding volcano. If you thought that was as bizarre as this manga was gonna get, we suggest you prepare for the next level of weirdness. Oh boy. So here on the next page, we see that Eggman has been reborn as Demon Eggman and encased in the skeleton of what looks to be a human-animal hybrid. It's not clear if Eggman can fly now, or if the skeleton is acting as some kind of flying vehicle, but he has red eyes, an evil-looking staff, and a bone to pick with Sonic, who's soaking up the praise from Amy and basking in his win. His enjoyment is short-lived. After Sonic gets a smooch from Amy, Eggman strikes, blasting Amy with his new staff and turning her to stone. His power is different and much stronger than before. Eggman blasts Sonic, turning just his hand to stone. Eggman's beam is more powerful, but it's still gonna take more than one hit to petrify this hedgehog. But rather than taking another hit that might be his last, Sonic cuts loose and starts running, showing his true speed for the first time. Eggman tells Sonic that he's not gonna let him get away, and chases him into a cave. It looks like our hero has gotten himself cornered, and Eggman takes the opportunity to deliver the killing blow. But instead of being turned to stone, Sonic absorbs and reflects the stone beam, sending it back to Eggman and turning him and his skeleton into the freakiest statue you've ever seen. In his trapped state, Eggman gets schooled by Sonic. It turns out that he fooled the villain into chasing him into the Cave of Judgment, a place where evil returns to those who commit it. Sonic says goodbye to Eggman and zips past him, saying they'll never see each other again. Unfortunately, Eggman seems prepared to hold a grudge for a very long time. He implies that even if it takes thousands of years, their paths will cross again. With the day actually saved this time, Sonic stands tall with an unpetrified Amy. In the sky above them, God tells the hero that he has been granted the life of eternity, and that he will always come back to destroy evil when it appears, being revitalized through the soul of a courageous boy, Nicky. Woo! What a ride that was, eh? There's a brief strategy guide that covers the levels in Sonic 2 after the end of the prehistoric story, but after that is another awesome tale that takes place in medieval times. The first page of Sonic the Hedgehog Medieval Edition, Save Princess Amy, introduces us to God-type Sonic and Princess Amy. It goes on to tell us, even today, the ruins of an old castle can still be seen on the outskirts of the town. This is a story about 1,000 years ago, when the castle was still standing. We're then introduced to Count Eggman, another version of the sorcerer who has collected enough black magic that he's now more powerful than the king himself. Apparently, he tried and failed many times to get Princess Amy to marry him. It's a real Princess Bubblegum Ice King situation. One winter morning, he finally had enough and tamed a giant vulture to carry him and steal the princess. The same day, Count Eggman takes Princess Amy to his lair and asks her to marry him again. She's disgusted by his creepy face and refuses, but Eggman gives her an ultimatum. If you refuse to marry me, your country will collapse. That's a risky play. Let's see how this one pans out for old Eggman. In the next panels, we meet Anton Veruca, a lizard bully, and another character from the cast of Shogakukan's Sonic manga. In this story, Anton is a ruffian disguised as a wizard who sees the opportunity for an easy payday. He offers the king Princess Amy's whereabouts in exchange for 100 gold coins. The king coughs up the gold immediately, and Anton stays true to his word. Then Count Eggman shows up to laugh at the weakened king. What, do you want the princess back? You want her back? Come and get her. Eggman also makes fun of the king. Desperate for help, the king calls on Knight Nicky. He tells his knight that if he saves the princess, he'll allow him to marry her. Again, the 90s were a different time. Figuring that Anton must know how to find Amy, Nicky the Knight goes to find him. Once he does, he asks Anton how he knew that Eggman had the princess. Anton doesn't seem eager to help Nicky, saying, "You idiot, why should I tell you?" Nicky replies with, "If you don't say it, I'll make you tell me," before turning into Sonic with a flash and dropping Anton with a single bonk to the head. Thoroughly convinced, Anton tells Sonic what he wants to know. "Fine, I'll tell you. The princess is locked up in the Valley of Death by a death robot. Little does Anton know, Count Eggman is secretly watching. It turns out, the Valley of Death is well known by the Hedgehogs as a place people don't return from. Nicky heads out to the valley anyway, and is followed by none other than Tails. Nicky tells Tails not to follow him, but goes with him anyway to provide backup. When they get there, Nicky and Sonic rush at the death robot with their swords drawn to defeat it, but Eggman pops out from the shadows with a surprise attack and gets the better of them. Nicky is dedicated to saving the princess, but Eggman strikes him and he faints. But the battle isn't lost yet, because God-type Sonic shows up to beat down Eggman and save the day. According to the manga, God-type Sonic is a hero who only appears when Nicky's heart is connected with God's heart. With Eggman defeated, Sonic scoops up Princess Amy. We aren't really sure what that means, but we do believe it's wholesome. The end. The final page shows a drawing of the manga's entire cast, which includes Sonic, the hero of the manga; Tails, real name Miles Prower, Sonic's little brother; Dr. Eggman, villain of this manga; Nicky, main character; Polly, Nicky's father; Charmy B; Brenda, Nicky's mother; Anita, Nicky's sister; Anton Veruca, Nicky's rival; Mud, Anton's brother; Little John, Nicky's best friend; Amy, Nicky's girlfriend. And with that, we've reached the end of the Sonic the Hedgehog book. As we said before, it's a very different take on Sonic, and perhaps more religious than you were expecting. But it is a piece of Sonic lore and history that we find fascinating.
Mario Kart Wii Deluxe is a hack containing 656 racetracks. It also features new battle arenas, new karts, new kart physics, custom characters and skins, updated and improved items, mirror mode for every racetrack, and adjustments to the game's AI. The hack was created by FJ Royette, with many of the tracks and tweaks being provided by the Mario Kart Wii hacking community. Version 7.0 released on February 3rd, 2023. There are many variations on the 7.0 release to choose from when playing. The light version only contains the racetracks and the gameplay tweaks. Standard version also includes custom sound effects and additional music. The Pro variation is split into 4 versions: red, blue, green, and purple. They contain all the features from Standard and Light and these additional features. Red version has custom character skins. Blue version has custom vehicles. Green version has custom characters. And purple version lets you choose between red, blue, and green versions at startup, with the catch that purple version only works on Dolphin emulators, not real hardware. Now on to the racetrack showcase. First up is a track called Floor It. It was ported from SpongeBob SquarePants, Lights Camera Pants, which is a party game released on PlayStation 2 and GameCube. Here's a track called Minecraft Circuit. There was a racing game released on PS2 called Cartoon Network Racer. This track, Outer Space Race, is from that game. Here's Dragonite Island, from the Pokemon series. There's a lot of Pokemon on this track. There are several tracks based on the Sonic the Hedgehog series. Here's Emerald Coast as it appeared in Sonic Adventure. The track appears to be a modified version of the original model from Adventure. The Twinkle Circuit tracks are here as well, plus a bunch of original tracks that take inspiration. Here's Casino Park from Sonic Heroes. Sonic games always contain high-speed levels. This level works great as a racetrack. 2 new Sonic tracks were added in version 7.0, a map based on the first special stage from Sonic CD, and Green Hill Zone. Here's Bob-omb Raceway, based on Bob-omb Battlefield from Mario 64 DS. Before we showcase more racetracks and characters from this hack, make sure you're subscribed and like the video. Trying really hard to grow GameFAQs Special, please help us. After all, you're about to see racetracks from Sonic, Pac-Man, Toy Story, and a ton of custom playable characters, and we can't show you all this without subscribers. The majority of Mario Kart tracks from the entire franchise are represented in this hack. We won't name every track here, but we'll give you the highlights. Here's the level from Mario Kart 7, Woohoo Loop. Here's Piranha Plant Slide. The retro style really looks good on the bigger screens. Newer Mario Kart games, like Mario Kart 7, contain underwater sections. These stages too were backported, with water sections intact. Here's Wario's Shipyard. The kart physics no longer change for the underwater sections due to them not being implemented in Mario Kart Wii. Here's a favorite track from Mario Kart DS, Delfino Square. Another DS classic, Waluigi Pinball. Last, here's Shroom Ridge. Mario Kart Super Circuit from the Game Boy Advance has tracks represented here too. They have been recreated here in 3D, or ported from other 3D Mario Kart games. This is because the original game had flat style tracks, similar to the original Mario Kart's Mode 7. The Luigi Circuit remake is near 1-to-1. Here's Sky Garden. Mario Kart 64 is well represented here. Here's the classic, Moo Moo Farms, and Koopa Troopa Beach. There are two versions of the Calamari Desert track here. First is the original, and the other's from Mario Kart Tour. Have you seen any racetracks you're dying to try out yet? Leave a comment below. Speaking of tracks from Mario Kart Tour, here's Merry Mountain, one of the many Christmas-themed tracks found here. Many new tour tracks were added in the 7.0 release, including New York Minute and Vancouver Velocity. These tracks don't seem to be of the same quality as the Nintendo-developed Mario Kart games. The custom Mario Kart Wiki keeps a list of every racetrack ported to Mario Kart Wii. Many of these tracks have been ported to Mario Kart Wii multiple times, from multiple sources, as many of these tracks have been remade multiple times for different Mario Kart games. For the most part, Mario Kart Wii Deluxe contains the best ports of each custom track you'll find in this vast track list. Here's White Land, from the original F-Zero on Super Nintendo. This track, Cloud Carpet, is from the Game Boy Advance game F-Zero Maximum Velocity. Here's a recreation of the original Mute City. Here's a version of Port Town Arrow Drive. It's actually ported from Super Smash Bros. Brawl. 7.0 saw the addition of a Polka Floats track, probably inspired by the level from Super Smash Bros. There are quite a few changes or features besides the tracks that aren't found in the base game. We'll go through them all, as listed in Mario Kart Wii Deluxe's documentation. Blue shells can now be dragged behind the player, like other items. Triple bananas now rotate around the cart, instead of being carried from behind. Thundercloud now causes the player to grow, rather than shrink. All licenses are unlocked when the game starts. You no longer lose points when disconnecting from online games. You can change characters between races while playing online. You can now pick up items while blasting through the level as Bullet Bill. Now all of the items are able to be left on the track after the player's hit, rather than just a select few. There are technical improvements to how the game handles the track lap count. Mega Mushrooms can now flip over non-racer NPC vehicles. Fake item boxes now appear exactly the same as real ones. Bananas now do more damage than in the base game, and shells now move faster. Here's Crash Cove from Crash Team Racing. There's a lot of crash tracks in this hack. Here's Blizzard Bluff. Ruse Tubes also makes an appearance in 7.0. Here's Spaceport Alpha from Diddy Kong Racing. Star City is also here. Finally, here's Ancient Lake. Pac-Man World Rally is a kart racer released on PS2 and GameCube. The track Cloud Garden was ported here. King's Course is also here. It's also from Pac-Man World Rally, but is based on the Katamari Damacy series. There is a subset of 4 Mario Kart games that you may not be aware of. That is the Mario Kart Arcade GP series. Here's Mario Beach. DK Jungle. Diamond City. And Stadium Arena. Several new GP tracks were added in 7.0 too. Here's Kingdom Away, Bowser's Castle, and Banana in Ruins. Mickey's Speedway was one of the last RareWare games released on Nintendo 64. Several tracks from Mickey's game are represented here, including this Grand Canyon track, Alaska, and Indianapolis. Even tracks from newer Mario Kart games, like Mario Kart 8, are represented. Here's Sunshine Airport, Dolphin Shoals, Electrodome, and Mount Wario. Here's Sherbert Land from Mario Kart Double Dash. Mushroom City is a favorite from Double Dash as well. Now you can play the original version of DK Mountain in Mario Kart Wii too. The original NES Super Mario Kart tracks are here as well. Here's Bowser's Castle 2, Koopa Beach, and Choco Island 2. Among the new features added to 7.0 include a 200cc kart mode for added challenge, increased enemy AI difficulty, and new voices for many of the characters. We won't be covering much of the online racing community here, but the Mario Kart Wii Deluxe Discord server can help you get started and find races. There are a ton of tracks inspired or directly based on a number of Mario games. Here's Snow Go, which is based on the Snowmobile minigame from Mario Party 9. Mario Party 7's Cartwheeled was added in 7.0. Sarasa Kingdom is based on Sarasa Land from Super Mario Land. Honeybee Hideout was inspired by Honey Hive Galaxy from Super Mario Galaxy. Here's more true to form Honey Hive Galaxy that was added in 7.0. Comet Observatory was also added in 7.0. Here's Luncheon Tour, based on the kingdom from Mario Odyssey. Here's Honeymoon Loon, based on the final kingdom from Mario Odyssey. And Cascade Kingdom was added in 7.0. Super Mario Sunshine is a very popular game to base custom tracks off of. First, Dolphin Harbor. Delfino Township. and Monaco GP, which reminds me the most of Sunshine. Super Paper Mario's Bitland was added in 7.0 as well. Kirby's Return to Dreamland Drive is based on the Wii game. As mentioned, the red version of this hack features custom skins. The skins in 7.0 have been updated in some cases. For instance, this gangsta-looking Mario became Dr. Mario. Luigi, Wario, Boo, Peach, Daisy, Diddy, and others had their custom skins changed as well. You'll see a mix of 6.0 and 7.0 footage in this video, so if you want to use some of these older skins, you may require the 6.0 version instead of 7. Now let's look at the custom characters from the green version of this hack. There are too many to list, but let's look at a few. Sonic, Shadow, Tails, Dr. Eggman, Crash, Pac-Man, Mega Man, Dr. Egad, King K. Rool, Rayman, Bomberman, Toon Link, Zero Suit Samus, and Pikachu. Here's Hyrule Castle, as it appeared in Wind Waker. Did you expect to see a track from Spyro the Dragon? Nasty Nork's Layers here, and it's based on the original level from the original game. Here's a level based on tanks from Wii Play. It can be difficult to tell where you can and can't drive in this one. Coral Cape is a really nice custom aquatic track. This track, Crossing Villa, is based on Animal Crossing. Here's the most popular track from Counter-Strike, Dust 2. Here's a level based on the Brain Age series from Nintendo DS. The Wii Shop channel got its own map. Yoshi's Woolly Raceway is based on Yoshi's Woolly World. There are 2 tracks here from VVVVV. Superstar Dystopia is one of the more unique city stages. Desktop Run is almost like a Toy Story track. Almost. Toy Story Raceway is a really nice themed level. Here's a really neat custom stage called Bowser's Termination Station. Of course, Waluigi would have his own Choco Factory. Bowser Jr.'s Crafty Castle looks like a mix of Yoshi's Crafted World and Paper Mario. It was added in 7.0. Battle maps from the Mario Kart series and other series are here too. Here's Battle Course 1 from the original Mario Kart. Here's the Battle Course Go Double Decker from Mario Kart 64. Honeybee Hive is here from Mario Kart 7. Here's the billiards table from Wii Play. Velo's Citadel is here from Crash Nitro Kart. Thanks to FJ Royette and all the contributors to Mario Kart Wii Deluxe. Please continue to watch GameFAQs Special. Check out our last episode on Super Mario Bros. History with Alec from SideQuest Gaming Review Show. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the notification bell. Comments help too. What was your favorite custom character or track from this hack? I really want the channel to grow, so me and the team can keep making content like this, so please subscribe. Thanks for watching. This has been a GameFAQs Special.